It is my honor this morning to introduce Tiffany Anderson. Tiffany Anderson is the superintendent of Topeka Public Schools in Kansas, in fact, the incoming superintendent. She's also an adjunct professor for the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at the University of Missouri St. Louis and for the Association of Supervision and Curriculum Development. Tiffany's work, her life's work, is innovative work serving schools in high poverty communities and improving achievement in rural, urban, and suburban public school districts. So if you, without further ado, if again, you will join me in welcoming Tiffany Anderson to the podium.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Oh, come on now. Good afternoon. I am so excited to be here. I flew in just for you. This is my third week of work in Topeka Public Schools, where I am the first African-American female superintendent, and excited to take that on. And so in this 30 minutes I literally flew in just for you today, and then when we're done around lunchtime, I'm flying right back. So it is a pleasure and honor to be here. We're going to fly through these slides really quickly. We have 30 minutes, and there are probably more slides on here than what 30 minutes will allow me to get through. So I'm going to talk fairly fast, but I want to shove it all in. I'm going to start, though. I believe there's a video. Is there a video queued in the back? A link to a clip queued in the back, and I'm not sure, and I don't know if that question goes to Jeremy or if that question goes to someone else. And Jeremy is so awesome. This little background, Jeremy made that by himself. Isn't he just so awesome? Jeremy, you know, we appreciate you. I'm making him nervous with this little microphone, but I can't stand behind a podium, so we're going to work this thing. If there is a video queued, and it's a link that I sent, let me know, and if not, I'm just going to keep this rolling. There we go. If we can dim the lights, please. One of the students this morning walking to school, and I couldn't wait to run across the street and said, "Where have you been? I haven't seen you." And she said, "Oh, it's because I'm going to Flow Valley." So she's one of my early college students. And so she spends half her day at Flow Valley and half her day at the high school. The college prep students, they will finish on a block schedule their high school curriculum at the end of their sophomore year. Their junior year, they will either go to UMSL or Flow Valley, and they will graduate high school with their associate's degree and their high school diploma at the same time. Talk about a running start. That means we've just alleviated the issue of paying for college for the first 2 years because our district has paid for it because we're sending them to college and paying for their classes. We have a 91% four-year graduation rate as of last year. That's a four-year graduation rate for 100% poverty, 98% African-American students. That's unheard of in many places. This past year, we placed 100% of our graduates in either a post-secondary institution or in a career. I believe it's our responsibility to ensure that every young person that comes through our doors is employable and is employed. In 2012, when I started, I knew that this district is a district with tremendous potential, unrealized potential. The district at that time had a very significant deficit. The scores had the district nearing being unaccredited, below 50 is unaccredited. As of 2014, we hit the 78% threshold for accreditation, and you need 70% to be accredited, and so we surpassed the accreditation benchmark. It's a district that was struggling not that long ago, and in the immediate future began to see gains by just changing how we work with people and how we serve people. And that all they really have to do is to make sure their kids show up, and we'll take care of the rest. If that's all they can do is physically get them here and they don't have clothes or food or supplies, that's okay, because we have all of that. I believe that you really have to serve the whole child in order to move any school. All right, we only got 30 minutes. We got 26 minutes. Come on, get those lights up. All right. So you just had a tour of Jennings School District. That was the last district that I was in. Most superintendents become superintendents at the end of their career because superintendents generally last 3 or 4 years before boards change over and new leaders come in. I have had the great pleasure of doing this work for most of my 23 years. And so this, Topeka, is my 4th district. Each district has improved within the first year. Anyone that tells you it takes 4 years to better serve students in poverty, to improve the health care, if it takes 4 years, that's a long time. You know how many high school students would have graduated in 4 years? How many families would have gone from having the haves to the have-nots in 4 years? Nobody has that kind of time. We know that all we have is time, and when it's gone, it's gone. So let's make the most of what we do for other folks, and let's make sure we expand their time in terms of their life timeline, as well as how we use resources to best serve folks. I won't have these items in my hand for long, so let me tell you what they are. I see these, some of you have these red booklets. I bought about 500 and put them out there. And so some of you picked up these little red booklets, which gives you a variety of articles about Jennings, things about health and wellness, serving the whole child, things that I won't actually be talking about fully here because our time is limited. But what I will say is that if you Google my name or Jennings School District, right now we're probably about the most nationally known place in terms of how you serve the whole child and how you move people out of poverty. So with that, so all of these articles are around for you, and I'm going to leave my business card out there, or a stack of them, just so that you know that I remain an extended resource for all of you, as you are for me. And so the Twitter handle is somewhere. Tweet, now you all, I'm not a Twitter person too much, but we have a Twitter on Topeka, and it's only my 3rd week, so they're still learning who I am. So you all tweet ideas, tweet your resources, so folks can get back to you as well. Let me start off before I begin any of this. Most people who have seen me throughout most of my 23 years will generally see me with a scarf, because I have a scarf fetish. I have that scarf fetish because in 2001, the experience that I had at Clark School really changed not only my outlook in many ways, but also my life. And so my own mental health, I guess, coping, Jeremy tried to take my scarf. I said, Jeremy, you can't take the scarf off. That's what makes him nervous about this microphone. So you can't take the scarf off. I have to have my scarf on. But let me share with you just this little bit, and it really is a lot about what we do impacts the community, or what will or won't happen. And I know that you know that and we say that, but let me bring this home to you. I was a principal in St. Louis City with 99% African American students, 100% free lunch. And with that group of students, there was a student that used to show up early in the morning, 5, 6 a.m., Rodney McAllister. His family had been homeless. He had gone from school to school. He had been with us since December. And so it had been a few months. And that student that you hotline over and over again, and no matter how many times we hotlined, either the follow-up wasn't what it needed to be, or he was returned home. And Rodney and his brother suffered from a variety of mental health issues. And so Rodney would be there first thing in the morning. I'd come with my briefcase. He'd be ready to walk me to the office. And so one morning at 8:02, I can remember it like yesterday, Officer Pother and Middleton, they called and they wanted to know if my students had all shown up to school and if I was missing anyone. Well, when you work in the city, in the urban area, that's the worst phone call to get. So I sent my parent liaison, who got all the names within about 2 minutes of my 500 students, came down and shared that there was a student. The class was about to go on a field trip. Rodney McAllister. Rodney McAllister died the night before across the street from the school in the park, Ivory Perry Park. Ivory Perry, for those of you who don't know, is an activist. It's so interesting how things come full circle. He studied lead, and so now as they're dealing with the Michigan crisis, it's just real interesting how things truly come full circle when we don't take care of business with health and wellness. He was at the park playing basketball, and actually his mother still at this point did not know he didn't come home because she was on, I believe, crack. And so when she came to the door, she just woke up from being on a binge, and they informed her that her child, Rodney, our student, was mauled to death by dogs the night before. And so my parents said, Dr. Anderson, we heard the screaming. And I asked, why didn't you open the door? And what they shared was, well, in this neighborhood, you don't open the door when you hear screaming. You don't bring up the blinds when you hear gunshots. You close the blinds, you hide under the bed, and you hope that it goes away. You see, what happened to Rodney would not have happened to your child in your neighborhood. It only happened to him because he lived in that neighborhood near Ivory Perry Park. And so every anniversary, Mr. Clark, the teacher of Rodney's class at the time, he goes and he cleans off and he invites me to join him that space which we planted. Now it's a full-grown tree full of life in the midst of a park that is actually falling apart. And so, in fact, if you Google Rodney or my name, you probably will see a scathing letter from me to the editorial board in St. Louis about how shameful it is that we can't at least take care of the park in the memory of Rodney that they helped plant. That year, the students wrote to the mayor, and we now have a stray dog law in St. Louis City because of the tragedy from Rodney McAllister and of the efforts of the students in St. Louis City. And so the plaque has my name, and it has a statement written from the students. The concrete has handprints from all the students in the classroom, and our names are above it. And if you're ever in St. Louis, go to Ivory Perry Park, and you will see a beautiful tree, unfortunately in the midst of a horrible park. And you will see apartments, which is where Rodney lived, next to the park. And the same playground equipment from years ago is still there, almost like it just happened. And so that same year, the teacher next to Mr. Clark's class left, and when she did not finish out the year, we refused to allow anyone else in our little space. So that year, I'm in the yearbook as the third grade teacher and the principal. And I began getting these scarves, these Save the Children scarves. This one isn't a Save the Children scarf, but the first one I got was one of handprints that reminded me of the concrete. And to this day, I don't know who sent them, but they sent them maybe once or twice a month. They used to come every week, then it became every month. And anyway, a year later, I never knew who sent me the anonymous Save the Children scarves, but since then, I've had a scarf fetish, so you'll always pretty much see me with the scarf. It is the reminder of the work that I do is in the name of Rodney. And the work that you do, although you have not met Rodney, is also in the name of all of our most vulnerable, who we are charged with supporting and helping. So when we talk about health and wellness, I'm going to focus on the education piece, but I'm going to pull together all of some of this stuff that you heard up front, okay, about how you use space, how you use resources. And we have 18 minutes, so I'm going to talk fast, so hold on, y'all. All right, so Jennings, and Jennings, which I'm no longer at Jennings, it's 100% free lunch. And Topeka at this point, it's about 60%, 98% African-American. It borders Ferguson, and many of our students have chronic medical conditions, asthma, diabetes, which is common in a high-poverty environment. Additionally, our accreditation, I want to just share that with you, below 70% is unaccredited in the state of Missouri, and above 70% is accredited. Below 50% is fully unaccredited. We were right at 57% in 2012. That's when I started. We began exceeding the accreditation benchmarks within 2 years, and to this day, we still exceed the accreditation benchmarks. And you kind of heard a little bit about that on the tape. Even when we started improving, I want you to know this. When you look for communities that are doing the kinds of things that were talked about here that need to be done, they are out there. They are difficult to find because often failure is what's put in front of you. Lack of hope is what's put in front of you. And because of that, we have to be intentional about finding models of success. Whether for me as in a school system, I look at edtrust.org a lot because I like to look at schools that are high performing. Often those schools are using resources differently, they're changing mindsets, and they truly are transformational. So even when we began to improve, the article says, surrounded by struggles, Jennings shines. How do you take something good and make it even sound crazy? But surrounded by struggles, Jennings shines because we were surrounded by schools, and they still are, that are unaccredited. And the state has intervened in many of those districts. I do want you to know that every time I'm in a district and improvement starts, people will say it's not possible in other places. Montgomery County, which is where the Virginia Tech shootings took place. It was my first superintendency, and nothing will ever prepare you for having to know which family member was killed based on who didn't pick up their child. That was my first superintendency. So when you talk about mental health, when you talk about trauma, When you talk about relationships, all that becomes full circle in how you support people and how you invest in communities. Montgomery County at Blacksburg Middle, the achievement levels were so low with African American students, and folks said, well, it's been this way a long time. As you can see, immediately improvements began. Still in Montgomery County, they said, well, you can't do it in the poverty neighborhood. Yes, you can. You can see that that's improved. Again, well, the ELL, because they don't speak English, it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to see the graphs improve. So we're going to talk about how we make that happen. And it doesn't matter what neighborhood, what the demographic is, the color, none of that matters. It really matters how you use resources and how you change mindsets. So we're going to spend our time on that. So the most recent project, which NPR and the Washington Post covered, I believe NPR covered, I know the Washington Post covered, was our Hope House. So I wanted to know what happens to kids when they don't have parents. I mean, who advocates for them to get to college? How do they get the FAFSA form done? And just a lot of those pieces. And a lot of that came because I had a student. I became his school mama. He was not singing in the choir, and I asked him why. He said he wasn't feeling it. I said, well, get in the car, and I want you to talk to me. I'll take you home. Child didn't have a home. Okay, so that year, as we went through kind of making sure he was cared for, I wondered what happens to the other 200 students in Jennings. And so we ended up saying, okay, we visited a place. It's kind of like a boarding school in St. Louis. It's not really a shelter, but it kind of runs a little like a boarding school. And we left there, myself, my HR person, people whose job had nothing to do with this piece. And I said to them, okay, we're going to do it. They said, Dr. Anderson, what we getting ready to do now? I said, look, we are going to open a homeless shelter. We're going to be the first district that opens up a homeless shelter. And any child that's homeless, any child that's in foster care, they're going to have a place to live. And we're going to do it in 30 days. They said, we are? Every school district and community has schools that they don't use, that are vacant, that are closed. The larger the city, the more buildings they have. We're a little tiny 4-square-mile place, and we even had an old priest rectory. It was dilapidated. It cost too much to tear it down, which is why it was still standing. So I said, okay, let's look. Oh, this is perfect. They said, oh, my goodness. I said, come on, y'all. We're going to flip that house. Don't y'all watch HTV? I wrote to HGTV, and they didn't come. But 30 days, October the 1st, 2015, November 1st, 2016, the first student moved in. It's now the Hope House. We give tours for people around the country to show that it is possible. So here's the question. What systems can you change to interrupt this cycle of generational poverty and health and wellness? And so in talking about that, earlier someone talked about zip codes, and zip codes do matter where you live. We started off talking about if Rodney didn't live there, this would not have happened. Not only wouldn't there be lots of stray dogs, but somebody would have opened their door if he didn't live there. So zip codes do matter. Here's what I will tell you. In Jennings, we opened up my very first year in 2012. We first did a needs assessment. And so I'm going to give you a few steps, just practical stuff that you can take back. We first said, okay, what do people need? And once we did the needs assessment, knew the unmet needs, why is it that they can't obtain the resources that they need? So what's the root of the problem? And then how are we going to galvanize the community to address that? And that's how we began to transform what we did. So in 2012, we said, okay, parents said, I need food. Okay, poverty, 100% poverty. Well, who funds a food bank? Well, St. Louis Food Bank. Well, can you open up a food bank in the school system? Well, they said, we haven't done that before. Well, we might as well try it now. Why not? I have a spot. You have the food. It's free. They opened it up. We turned a building into a food pantry. We now give out 8,000 pounds of food a month. Can you imagine? The entire community gets the food from us. And then we put the restorative justice piece in there where the students in the alternative school, that's who runs the food pantry. Changes how they believe in themselves and others. So let me tell you about toxic stress. For us, last year, we opened up a hospital. We paired up with the university. We just said, we have all of these kids that are coming. We know that prolonged stress will make a change in their decision making. We know that to be the case. We know that if you're in poverty, if you have greater than 4 ACEs, you're more likely to have greater problems and health issues. We already know that. So why don't we interrupt it? Well, WashU paired up with us, wrote a grant. We now have a hospital in a high school. If you break an arm, just come to school. We got it. Literally. We do all of this screening with eyes and hearing. Why don't we do mental health screening, right? It's just uncommon sense. And so I border Ferguson, and I'm going to go back to this toxic stress. This is a really good article. Let me see, how do you go back to this? If you get a chance to look it up, it's in St. Louis Post-Dispatch, written by Nancy Cambria, The Impact of Poverty and Learning and the Stress of the Ferguson Effect. So we border Ferguson. It's so interesting when you can change mindsets about what you can do with resources. So most people would say, you can't pay for a hospital. Well, WashU does it. And not only that, because the families, all they needed was a clinic. Then here you go. You have a clinic that they would have been using anyway. We just changed where it's located. So the resources paid for. Same with the food bank and similar to other items. Our parents, I asked parents, we had our PTO, and they weren't showing up. And they said, Dr. Anderson, parents don't show up. I said, why are you all not coming to the PTO? And they said, we need food. Okay, we're going to start giving out 20, 30 pounds of groceries. Parents show up all the time. Okay, what else do you need? So I got to wash my clothes. Well, okay, well, you wash your clothes. Well, there's no laundry mat in Jennings. No laundry mat. I got to take 2 buses and a transfer and this and that and the other. Okay, well, we'll fix that. Every school now has a washer and dryer. You can wash 1 load for free in exchange for 1 hour volunteerism. Parents volunteering all the time, washing clothes while they're doing it. How do you use your resources? Okay? It really is about how you use your resources. So that article, and I'm not going to read through it, but I do want to mention a piece in the article, and I will read this exactly so I don't get it wrong. When children don't get a break from stress, when adults can't or don't and I'll look down here, can or don't know how to shield children from it, their developing bodies overproduce certain hormones. And so things like what we have found, diabetes, asthma, all these other ailments you'll see in places with toxic stress. So we decided we were going to be the first place that was a trauma-informed school district in St. Louis. So our staff just went through all of them. Custodians, secretaries, you don't know who kids are going to connect with. So everybody in the organization has this trauma-informed training, so we understand the story behind the behavior, and not just for kids, but for some adults. Some of the people you all working with in terms of traumatic events that have this prolonged impact. So understanding that. Really quickly, these 3 things, content, relationships, pedagogy, everything you learn, if you are an educator here, just lump it into those 3 things. That's how you turn around any classroom, school, or district. I focus on relationships. Why? Because kids and adults who work for you, they will work for you if they trust you. They won't if they don't. So anybody in here working in any organization, if you don't have relationships, you can't make anything else happen. Whether it's galvanizing the community, whether it's making sure that you get the resources you need. So for us, and there's a list of the various relationship building items that we've done. I talked about already most of them, but high visibility is huge. The economic opportunities, when we look at poverty, how are you making sure that you're improving that? For us, for economic opportunities, well, we have jobs every now and then in a school system. So that means 30% of our staff are employees, are parents in the district. Recycling those economic dollars, also letting them know that we want to invest in them, either their parents or their alumni. We even opened a job. Some of my students, when they got out, and they said, I just can't get a job. And I have to be home and take care of my family. So we started something called, what do I call it? Alumni intern. I don't even know what that is. Alumni intern. What job is that? Whatever we want to give you, baby. We just got you hired. It's $10 an hour. They all make $10 an hour. Alumni intern. But it's this idea of how do you use resources that you have to use anyway. The other item is Saturday school. Now, if you're a parent in here, raise your hand. Okay. Keep your hand up if you have parent conferences on Saturdays at your school. All the hands went down. Now see how arrogant of us as a system to think that folks work flexible jobs, much less in a high poverty, because most people who are poor are working poor. Most of them work. And so 2 or 3 jobs generally. And so how arrogant of us it is that if you want parents involved, but then you have this 9 to 5 time in which you're supposed to come and meet with me. So here's what I tell staff. When we hire people, their first orientation is a tour of the community. So what do you do with your staff? When you hire people, all y'all hire people, work with people, hopefully the first thing you're doing is giving them a tour of your community, because you should, whether you're in a school system or not. First thing we do. And then we say, well, what did you notice? Oh, you noticed that all the blinds were closed and it was dark. Imagine that student who grew up for 5 years in a dimly lit room, and then they come into your class and you have all these colors, and they have this sensory overload, and they're all over the place. Well, that's why. So let's make sure. So, teaching the new teachers that piece. We also talk about relationships and say, where else do parents like hanging out? Oh, well, they all come to the basketball game at night, or they come to the football game. Well, then where should you be having your parent conferences? So, to the football game. I mean, thinking differently about how you utilize your resources. If you look on the Topeka website, you'll see a link with my name, and it'll say YouTube. So I just started saving some of these YouTube presentations so that, because several people have just been fascinated with what we do. There was something on the Discovery Channel. It was too long to show you all. It's about 6 minutes. And they just shadowed a student who was a pregnant teen who didn't drop out because resources were used differently for her in Jennings. And so I just want you to know, with all of these pieces, relationships are most critical to anything that you do. We know that the level of commitment and successful, not just schools, organizations, is exceedingly high for every staff member. And you view those opportunities and challenges as truly opportunities. I'm excited about Topeka because I looked and said, oh my goodness, how many counselors, how many social workers? First of all, it's an amazing place. They have so many innovative things. But now we're looking at trauma, and they actually are going through, and this is before I came there, they signed up to get trauma informed. And then beyond that, so they understand that trauma has an impact, but they're willing to think differently about how we support kids. So this wraparound support approach, I truly believe will make a tremendous difference in the work that we do there, a place that's already great, that's looking to see how can we continue to build. We can, whenever we choose, successfully teach all children whose schooling is of interest to us. We already know everything we need to know. Someone turned in a question about that, about graphs, and said, man, we keep studying the stuff we already know what we need to know. Whether or not we do it just depends on how we feel about the fact that we haven't so far. Now see, and I had 3 minutes left. You held up that 5-minute card, someone up here. They said 5 minutes left. That's my last 3 minutes. And so as I close and leave the stage so we can go on to the next item, I do want to say a lot of the things that I've shared have been about schools. But really this is about how you use your resources, how you change what you do. My first event in Topeka, and there have been several, when I was first hired, or they announced that I was be hired, I first went to the homeless shelter, and I spent the day there. It has buses that pick up students. That's how many students we're talking about. And then from there, I spent time with the United Way. And I have to tell you this amazing project they have. They have something, you have to look it up. They've gotten all these awards, and many people here probably even know about it. All these awards, Pine Ridge. It is a collaboration that Topeka Public Schools had a few years ago with the Housing Authority, and they opened up a preschool in the middle of the Housing Authority's area that services the families that live there. And they have parents as teachers. They now have an aquaponics lab. And so the teachers are funded by the school system, multiple preschools, all serving families in the Housing Authority. Can you imagine the cohort data? The fact that we really are investing in early childhood. And all it took was just redirecting dollars a little differently, collaborating with the Housing Authority, which the Housing Authority in Topeka, Kansas is amazing. They have since opened up this year a wellness facility at the Housing Authority, a community agency. They're running summer school. That's a whole nother way to think about housing, isn't it? And they're already asking me, can they get another preschool teacher for next year? So how are you using your resources, your time and talent? That's all we all have. And when it's gone, it's gone. So when you leave this conference, if you do nothing else, I want you to say, what am I going to start doing? And what am I going to stop doing? And how will I use my allies to become far more powerful in giving others voice? Thank you.